Sound. Assembly chamber. 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 Sound.
Please be seated. Emma Sheeran has been given leave to make a statement on Jeffrey Donaldson's conviction of rape and child sexual abuse that fulfils the criteria set out in Standing Order 24. Members should be aware that as the sentence has not yet been handed down, the sub judice rules applies. However, I am satisfied that this is clearly a matter of public importance, and I am therefore content for the matter to be discussed this morning by members. In doing so, members should note that there are strict reporting restrictions with regards to the identity of the victims. Any discussion of their identities would be an obvious contempt of court. Members must not therefore say anything which might have the effect of identifying the victims. If other members wish to be called, they can do so by rising in their places. Ms. Sheeran.
Yesterday we saw former member of this House, Jeffrey Donaldson, found guilty of child sex abuse charges, including rape. Our thoughts are with his victims, who have suffered more than any of us could ever comprehend. I want to commend them for the strength and dignity that they have shown, both in coming forward to report the abuse in the first instance and over the course of recent weeks, during a trial that saw every element of their lives pulled apart and examined. Their resilience throughout this process has been nothing short of admirable, and I hope beyond hope that it gives other survivors the courage to come forward. How someone capable of such depravity could rise through the ranks of political office and retain the trust and confidence of so many for so long is hard to comprehend. He used his position to ensure the silence of his victims and attempted to gaslight them upon confrontation. His attitude, his audacity, compounded the harm he inflicted through his actions. No one is above the law, and I hope all victims watching this unfold will take strength from that. Justice in this case was hard fought for and so deserved, and I hope the survivors received the support that they should have had all those years ago. For all of those who are triggered by this news, we send our solidarity. Please come forward. Reach out for help. There are organisations out there like Nexus who do incredible work and are there for you. No one deserves to be abused. It is never your fault.
Michelle McElwain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A jury has concluded that Jeffrey Donaldson is guilty of some of the most heinous and despicable crimes imaginable. We welcome the fact that justice has been done and the rule of law has prevailed. Our thoughts are first and foremost with those innocent victims whose lives were profoundly impacted by his vile and filthy behaviour. What they endured was wicked. The abuse itself was appalling, but so too was the burden placed upon them in having to relive that trauma through a lengthy criminal process. It is right he will face the full force of the law in sentencing. Today we stand with those victims. We salute their courage, their resilience, and their determination to speak the truth. Their bravery in coming forward should serve as an encouragement to others who have suffered abuse, that they will be heard and be believed. No one is above the law. It does not matter how prominent a person may be, what position they hold, or how much influence they possess. Everyone is equal before the law and equally subject to it. The evidence presented in this case was shocking. It is now clear beyond doubt that Jeffrey Donaldson abused positions of trust and power over many years while concealing vile and manipulative behaviour. It is now clear that Jeffrey Donaldson led a double and duplicitous life. His lies and cover-ups have now been exposed. The spotlight of justice has shone upon them. That should serve as a reminder that perpetrators cannot outrun justice. We are writing to the Forfeiture Committee Cabinet Office asking that Jeffrey Donaldson be stripped of his knighthood and Privy Council titles. But today, our thoughts remain with the victims. We pray that this verdict brings comfort as they move forward with their lives.
Hear, hear.
Kate Nicholl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Alliance Party, we want to recognise the extraordinary, remarkable bravery and courage of the two victims. The verdict yesterday won't undo the harm that was done to them, but hopefully it sends a clear recognition that what happened was wrong and that Jeffrey Donaldson will feel the full weight of the law. It's a clear message that no one, regardless of what position you hold in society, is above the law. We're very conscious that there are two victims who have been at the centre of this, who have shouldered so much, but there are also many other people who are watching, who are reliving things that happened to them in their childhood, people who maybe had information that they haven't passed on. And the message is very clear that if you come forward, justice can be done. There is the Nexus helpline, 08088021414, which is local. It has a chat function if people don't feel comfortable speaking directly. But there's also an amazing charity called the National Association for People Abused in Childhood. I've been working with a number of constituents who were abused as children, and the impact of that abuse cannot be downplayed. This has stayed with them for their whole lives, and the silence compounds the trauma. So as a society, as an assembly, we have to do everything we can to allow people to come forward and make sure that they are supported when they come forward with that story, because so often when you share what you've been through and you are not supported in the way that is necessary, that can make it so much worse. We have so much work to do. The two survivors are remarkable, and they have done so much for so many people in Northern Ireland, and we wish them well. They've gone through a very difficult period, and we hope that there is healing from this as it goes forward. And to everyone else who has been impacted, who is reliving awful things that have happened to them, please know that there is support there, and we are here to support you. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Ulster Unionist Party, could I praise the courage and the tenacity of the victims of Jeffrey Donaldson. They showed remarkable courage in giving the evidence they did and in taking this case to court. And whilst we are all equal under the law, and that is an important lesson, they knew full well that they were not giving evidence against a private citizen. They knew the level of scrutiny and public attention and media attention that this case would invoke, and yet they give evidence. They got justice. And there's a powerful lesson in that for everyone in our country, right across the United Kingdom, right across these islands, that no matter who the accuser is, no matter what power they have, no matter how long it was ago, that there is a justice system in which we are all equal. That the police service will follow the evidence without fear or favour, that the prosecution service will do their job without fear or favour, and that the judge and jury will do their job impartially and professionally. I do hope that if any good comes from this, it is that more victims will come forward against anyone who is a predator or sexual abuser in our country. The victims have anonymity, and that should be absolutely protected, but we should always remember, and they will have known, that anonymity doesn't spare you the ordeal of reliving and giving in the evidence, both to the police and then in court, the most invasive, vile abuse of your body by the perpetrator. It doesn't spare you going through cross-examination and being called a liar, as Jeffrey Donaldson accused them of being. The sentencing will be a matter for the judge independently, but of course only the most severe sentence is appropriate. Not only were these vile crimes against the most vulnerable children, but also Donaldson showed no remorse. He turned the tables on the victims and said they were the liars. And of course they had to watch him through his life, walk around leading a double life, even having the audacity to wear a Christian symbol on his lapel as he walked into court. He stands in disgrace. It is right, I've already written to the Forfeiture Committee hoping that he gets these knighthoods stripped of him. I think in cases like this it will also be appalling that, as far as I'm aware, there's no way of removing the pension from this man, who will receive a lavishly funded taxpayer's pension. And it will come into his bank account every single month while he's in prison. But I want to return to the victims. This country owes them a huge debt of gratitude, because they did the most difficult thing imaginable. And in doing so, they have sent a signal to everyone. We're all equal under the law, and if you're a victim of crime, come forward and you can get justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jeffrey Donaldson was convicted yesterday of the most grave and depraved crimes that it is possible to imagine. He stands not just shamed, but convicted in the eyes of the law by a jury of his peers. I first of all, as with others here, on behalf of my party, want to stand with and acknowledge the extraordinary courage and resilience of his victims, those survivors of his abuse who showed remarkable resilience and courage in, first of all, making their report, and then secondly, having the resilience to sit through a court and trial process in which their abuser sought to depict them as liars, sought to deflect his own culpability for their abuse with his own lies and deflection. That courage, that resilience that they demonstrated will, I hope, be an inspiration to all those in our society, and there will be those watching this who will see this tonight, the remarks in these chambers, who have themselves suffered abuse over many years and decades, and they haven't yet felt able to make a report. I hope the courage of Donaldson's victims, survivors, give them the inspiration and heart to feel that they can report their abuse, that a criminal justice system will respond to them, hear them, and find accountability for them. It's important to acknowledge the work of the police officers and the prosecutors who took this case forward and who got justice and accountability for his victims. I echo others who have highlighted the important work of organisations like Nexus, who offer support and signposting for people who have suffered abuse. But a word, Mr. Speaker, about Jeffrey Donaldson, and I will call him Jeffrey Donaldson, not Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, and I will not apply any of the honours to him to which he is clearly not entitled and which should be stripped from him forthwith. He stands in abject disgrace. When sentencing an individual, a judge will look not just at the impact of the crime on the victims of that crime, but at the culpability of the perpetrator. Culpability meaning your responsibility, the responsibility you hold. Those of us who hold public office, particularly those who hold high office for many decades, have high levels of responsibility. That means that Mr. Donaldson has the highest level of culpability. He has brought himself into abject disgrace. He has used his power and his profile to continue the suffering of innocent victims. He should feel the full force of the law. I stand with those victims here today.
Timothy Gaston.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Like all other speakers in the House, I want to pay tribute this morning to Victim A and Victim B and the courage they have shown to ensure justice has been delivered. The two women who had the courage to come forward to tell their stories and seek justice after years of the most wicked and depraved abuse that took place. Their courage, their fortitude, is something we all need to acknowledge. It is the one bright spot in the darkness and evil that has been exposed over the last number of weeks and rightly ended in yesterday's damning verdicts. The light arising in the darkness is that the justice system delivered for victims. Donaldson, who was one of the most powerful people in not just Northern Ireland, but he rose to the top of UK politics. He was an MP, a knight, a Privy Councillor. He was held accountable for the evil crimes he committed against children, and I trust that they will find some form of closure on the back of yesterday's verdict. These are indeed difficult times for them. Who knows who else will come forward in the coming days, but I trust they will know that justice has been delivered. I trust that other victims will take courage from what they have witnessed over the last number of weeks and what happened yesterday in delivering those damning verdicts. The coming days, I believe, will raise profound questions about the impact that this scandal has had on politics and indeed the very existence of this place. I won't be behind the door in raising those issues when the time comes. But for now, I simply want to salute the courage of Victim A and Victim B, that they have shown to come forward and see this through to the end, to ensure that justice has been delivered and that this predator will no longer walk the streets and will do the time that he deserves. He won't hurt and can't hurt anyone. He's in the place he should be, and they should have been there years ago.
Jonathan Buckley.
Thank you, Speaker. Today our collective thoughts are with the victims of Jeffrey Donaldson. It's only because of your tremendous courage and bravery that an evil sexual predator is no longer free or held in high office. Jeffrey Donaldson, a fraudulent monster, a wicked deceiver, a convicted child abuser and rapist. There is nothing more despicable. A verdict has been delivered, justice has been done, and a lengthy sentence should now follow. We owe that to the victims in this case, and indeed to the sexual victims right across this land. Justice must be served. To the many victims, let this case prove conclusively that no one, regardless of status, is ever above the law.
Thank you. That concludes the statement on Jeffrey Donaldson's conviction of rape and child sexual abuse. Next item on the order paper is member statements. Members wish to make a statement, do so by rising in their place. And I call Aisling Riley.
Today, the Infrastructure and the Economy Ministers, alongside our Ardvara and others, will be at the formal media launch of the Flag Hall today in Belfast. And this marks another significant step as we move into the final stretch of preparations for what will be one of the biggest cultural events ever hosted in our city. The countdown is well and truly on, and you can actually feel that there's a real buzz building right across Belfast. Over the past number of years, communities, volunteers, musicians, businesses, council and organisations have worked closely together, and their commitment and enthusiasm have laid the foundations for what promises to be a truly memorable Flag Hall. Belfast is ready to welcome visitors from every corner of Ireland and from much further afield. We are ready to showcase the very best of our city and the people who make it so special. Whether visitors find themselves in the north, south, east or west Belfast, they will experience the warmth, the creativity and the hospitality for which our city is renowned, agus by falsha war rifgach Eladunya. The Fleadh is a celebration of our musical traditions and our cultural heritage. It's about bringing people together through music, language, dance and community spirit, but it is also about the opportunities. It's an opportunity to showcase Belfast on an international stage. It will support local businesses, it will boost our hospitality and tourism sectors, and it will bring benefits to communities right across the city. Local traders and family-run businesses, the cultural venues and visitor attractions, the positive impact will be felt throughout the entirety of Belfast, and most importantly, it gives us the chance to tell a positive story about our city, a city that is confident, a city that is welcoming, and a city that is proud of its heritage. There's still a lot of work to be done and the finishing touches to work through, but I look forward to seeing Belfast welcome musicians, performers, families and visitors from near and far for a celebration of music, culture and community in our city of Belfast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week at the Executive Office Committee, we heard evidence from the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery. And today, like many innocent victims across Northern Ireland, they will wake up at the beginning of yet another day where they won't receive truth and justice for the murder of their loved one. There is vital evidence sitting there relating to their case, but shamefully, the Irish government are sitting on their hands. They continue to lecture others, but they fail to provide innocent victims with the chance of seeing the perpetrator of violence brought to account for their heinous actions. This was laid bare last Wednesday as representatives from the ICRIR said that they have written to the Irish government between 11 and 12 times without any form of reply from them. That is shameful. The Irish government's failure to cooperate has been highlighted by my party leader repeatedly, but it was stark to hear the figures so directly from Peter Sheridan. The Irish Government has continually sought to lecture the UK on legacy issues whilst doing nothing to help victims and survivors find the truth about what happened to them. There were over 500 murders during the Troubles along the border, and in many of the cases the attacks were launched from the Republic of Ireland, with the perpetrators also finding refuge in the south. What are the Irish Government hiding? It's interesting that Sinn Féin for years have called on the UK Government to provide information, yet the silence is deafening when it comes to the Irish Government. There are people who sit in this chamber who know exactly the truth about what happened, yet are prepared to lie about their involvement in the IRA. They heap trauma and hurt on innocent families as they continue to laud and celebrate the victim maker, the perpetrators of violence, and the Irish Government is no better. Recently, in a letter to the Executive Office, the Department of Foreign Affairs indicated that they would do all that they could to assist in legacy investigations, but this accounts to nothing more than gaslighting in the worst kind to those who have had to live with pain and grief needlessly at the hands of terrorists. Their position, the Irish Government's position, is indefensible, just in the same way those who sit across the benches continue to glorify and laud the bomb maker and those who pulled the trigger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether you've noticed, but the cost of living crisis no longer seems to dominate our headlines in the way that it once had. But for many households in Northern Ireland, that's a daily reality. Families continue to pay rising food costs. Energy bills remain significantly higher than pre-crisis levels, thanks to the activities of war being carried out, and increasing rents in both private and social rented sectors are harming lots of families. For many people, wages and benefits are simply not keeping pace with what is now the cost of living, and this is why the issue of the local housing allowance is so important. Now, the local housing allowance determines the maximum amount of housing support available to people renting in the private sector through the housing benefit or universal credit. And while rates were reset in April 2024 to reflect the lowest 30% of local market rates, the Westminster Government subsequently froze those rates for 25-26 and confirmed in January they will remain frozen for 26 and 27. The Resolution Foundation has highlighted the consequences of this approach. As rents continue to rise, housing support is falling further behind actual housing costs, and their analysis shows that rent increases have already significantly outpaced income for households. Across the UK, nearly half of private renters receiving universal credit are no longer having their full costs recovered. For Northern Ireland, where private rents have risen very sharply in recent years, and where too many households are already struggling with fuel, food and childcare costs, this freeze places additional pressure on families who have the least room in their budgets to absorb it. Mr. Speaker, every pound spent covering a rent shortfall is a pound that cannot be spent on heating a home, feeding a family or supporting children's opportunities. If we are serious about tackling poverty, reducing homelessness and helping working families through the continuing cost of living pressures, then housing support must keep pace with housing costs. The Westminster Government to freeze local housing allowance risks pushing more households here in Northern Ireland into hardship. The boogie's favourite, potentially for Prime Minister, is Andy Burnham, and I draw the House's attention to the fact that as Mayor, he called for the local housing allowance rates to stop being frozen and actually to be increased. If he becomes Prime Minister, perhaps he can change something that Westminster is putting onto all of our families who are in poverty. At a time when so families are already stretched to breaking point, the government made a bad choice, and I hope that they will rectify that. Thank you.
Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to highlight the urgent need for a new outdoor recreation strategy for Northern Ireland. The latest People in the Outdoors Monitor provides compelling evidence of the value that people place on our natural environment.
70% of adults spend time outdoors in natural places at least once a week, generating an estimated 134 million visits each year. 4 in 5 people would like to spend more of their free time outdoors, and the great majority of visits deliver benefits for physical health, mental well-being and nature connection, with many people joining me for a run every week. However, access to those benefits is not equal. Only 17% of adults, around 1 in 6, say that they have local green space within a 5-minute walk of their home. That contrasts with mapping that indicates that 48% of households are within 400 metres of accessible green space or off-road trail. The difference between what exists on a map and what people experience in daily life should concern us all. A place may be nearby, but it is of limited value if it's inaccessible, unsafe, poorly connected, inadequately maintained, or does not feel welcoming. The rural figures are particularly stark, and that should surprise most of us, because while 63% of urban households are within 400 metres of a green space or a trail, the figure is just under 20% for rural households, and this falls to under 13% in open countryside and small villages. Being surrounded by countryside, Mr. Speaker, does not necessarily mean having safe, legal or practical access to it. Too many rural residents must travel by car or walk on roads that were never designed for recreation. Outdoor recreation is not a marginal leisure issue. It contributes to preventative health, mental well-being, social connection and rural development, active travel, sustainable tourism and care for our environment. It supports priorities across several departments, yet responsibility, like many things here, remains fragmented. Northern Ireland's most recent Outdoor Recreational Action Plan was published in 2014, which predates most of us here, not yourself, Mr. Speaker, but much has changed since then, and many of its actions are now outdated, incomplete, or no longer equal to the challenges before us. In December 2024, the Minister confirmed that there was a commitment within the Environmental Improvement Plan to publish an outdoor recreation strategy, and that was to be progressed as resources permitted. I just take the last few seconds to call on the dear Minister to work with his executive colleagues to initiate a new, ambitious and properly resourced outdoor recreation strategy for Northern Ireland that should provide clear cross-government leadership, address inequalities in local access and set out practical progress. Because I can, and I'm sure everybody else here can understand, the practical outworkings of better physical health, better mental health and connectivity for our communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is hard to believe that a decade ago today, another baking hot day, certainly in London, a referendum took place in which the UK voted, tragically in my view, to leave the European Union. Of course, it bears repeating that Northern Ireland did not vote to leave the European Union. Northern Ireland voted to remain in the European Union, but was removed against our will. At that time, the warnings were clear. There were warnings that Northern Ireland would be a victim of Brexit, that the complexity of relations on the island of Ireland between the islands of Britain and Ireland would be jeopardised. There were warnings that Britain would be a poorer country. There were warnings that Britain would be a less relevant country on the world stage. All of those have been proven true, I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, in spades, and I don't think anybody in this chamber could dispute that. Now, Brexit is very personal for me, because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be a politician here today. I'm sure there's probably some in that chamber who regret Brexit for that very reason. I was in number 10 Downing Street on the 23rd of June, and overnight that night, I was somebody who held an Irish passport and believed in the ultimate bringing together the two parts of this island, but I was working then as a UK civil servant. In a sense, I represented that complexity of relationships that had been created after 1998 and was underpinned by common British and Irish membership of the European Union. That idea that we could overcome our tragic, awful history through interdependence and common purpose, that extraordinary project which was and is the European Union, something which provided and underpinned the peace on the island of Ireland, though many are amazingly still in denial about that. It was the local manifestation of what our former leader John Hume called, and was right to call, the greatest peace project in human history, the European Union, as flawed, bureaucratic, legalistic and frustrating as it often is. That extraordinary peace project helped underpin stability and trust on this island and on these islands, and it was lost on the 23rd of June 2016, along with lots of other things. along with a sense that we could work together rather than simply operate a zero-sum game of the UK versus Ireland. Gone has been hundreds of billions of pounds in tax revenue and economic growth, which we feel every day in terms of the squeeze on our public services. Gone was any sense of stability as we see again a new Prime Minister about to enter the UK. We here have a choice to make in the future, Mr. Speaker. The SDLP will have a conference on Thursday this week about change in these islands. We believe the best future for the UK too would be rejoining the European Union. I don't think that's very likely, but we think the best choice for Northern Ireland is to rebuild that common purpose and to build a new Ireland back inside the European Union. It's why I'm in politics. It's an inspiring vision 10 years on, and I look forward to talking to people about it.
Catastrophic, kamikaze economics, politically toxic. There is no other way to describe the Brexit debacle. And yet 10 years on, those within this chamber who continue to cheerlead are burying their heads in the sand. They tell us that they have not yet got the Brexit that they actually wanted. I can only assume that that means that it's not enough of an unmitigated disaster for them. Last week, the London School of Economics was emphatic. It said there is now conclusive evidence that Brexit has been an economic failure. I and others predicted in 2015 that that would be the case, and the greater number of citizens agreed with us. Now there is even greater opposition to our exclusion from the European Union. The fallout from Brexit is a reality which is being felt hard by workers and families daily across the North. And that's illustrated in current evidence which we have received in the Economy Committee. In one, we learned that our electricity bills here are now higher as a result of Brexit. In another, we heard that one skills programme has lost £40 million of investment in a year due to the loss of European funding. But Brexit has also poisoned our political process. It has destabilised power sharing and it has created a deep political fault line. However, Brexit has also been a political game changer. More and more citizens are now looking beyond the catastrophe of Brexit and the chaotic Westminster politics which brought it about. The fact is that Brexit has brought a positive focus to the democratic logic of self-determination and constitutional change here in Ireland. There is a way to remove the negative and enduring legacy of Brexit. Irish unity provides that option. So it's time to widen participation in the debate. The term of Ireland's presidency of the European Council provides an important opportunity to do so. So, the Irish and British governments should begin planning for the constitutional change that will reunite this country and create a pathway back into the European Union for us all.
Keith Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is always a privilege to celebrate sporting success in Mid Ulster. Today we congratulate Nigel Davison, a proud Cookstown businessman, on his outstanding achievement at the High Rocks World Championship in Stockholm. To see him compete and succeed on the world stage is an achievement that makes us all in Cookstown incredibly proud. From balancing the demands of running a thriving business to committing himself fully to elite level training, Nigel has demonstrated what can be achieved through hard work, focus and an unwavering belief in what is possible. His story is an inspiration to many and a reminder that great things can grow from small beginnings. Nigel, we are immensely proud of you. Congratulations on everything you have achieved, and we wish you every success as you continue your High Rocks journey. Whatever comes next, you carry with you the support and admiration of your friends, family, customers and the wider community. Well done, Nigel, and we wish you well in the future.
John Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today as Chair of the All-Party Group on Climate Action to address the extreme heatwave forecast to hit mainland UK, including a rare red weather warning with temperatures forecast to be as high as 40 degrees. Speaker, this is yet another reminder that climate change is not a distant future risk that we can brush under the carpet. Extreme weather is becoming more frequent, more intense and more disruptive. Heat waves, flooding, storms, drought and wildfires are increasingly becoming part of our new normal. Whilst we may be glad, of course, to see a bit of extra sunshine once in a while, the consequences of repeated and intensifying heat are serious. Heat waves affect public health, particularly for older people, young children and those with underlying health conditions. They place pressure on our health service, disrupt transport and infrastructure, reduce productivity and threaten food production, water supplies and biodiversity. If these events continue to grow in severity and frequency, the cost in terms of our communities, our local economy and our natural environment will only rise. Only 2 weeks ago, Mr Speaker, the Met Office hosted an event in this building discussing climate change impacts, and it delivered a clear message that the UK's climate is considerably warmer now than in past decades, with extreme heat becoming more likely as global temperatures rise. That is why climate action cannot continue to be treated as optional or as a side issue. It must be central to everything we do and all policy we make. I want to recognise the work of my colleague, the dear Minister Andrew Muir, who is using the powers within his remit to help mitigate climate change. That includes supporting policies to reduce emissions from agriculture and land use, as well as wider work to protect and restore our natural environment, and also engage across sectors, including at the Met Office event that I've just referenced. Alliance will continue to support ambitious, evidence-based climate action, but meeting this challenge will require the support of all parties. Therefore, Mr Speaker, I call on all parties in the House to support Minister Muir in his efforts to back meaningful climate action and to recognise that extreme heat that we witness in the coming days is part of a much bigger and more urgent challenge. Thank you.
Minister McHugh.
Men's Health Week concluded last weekend on Father's Day. Having Father's Day during Men's Health Week is appropriate, as men often think that they have no other choice but to soldier on. In reality, however, looking after ourselves, looking after those around us, those who rely on us, and those who need us. The theme of this year's Men's Health Week was one step at a time, progress, not perfection. There are small steps that we can all take to improve our health. We can book a health check with our GP. We can speak more openly about our mental health. We can take part in the men's shed or in a walking group, or we can engage in other forms of exercise. All those things can lead to positive health outcomes. If we take the time to look after ourselves, it can give us more time in the future. It was as a result of a routine health check that I identified the high level of iron in my blood. It was confirmed as hemochromatosis, a hereditary condition that sounds frightening, but which can be treated with the regular drawing of blood, like a blood donation. It was during a visit to the doctor that I learned that I had a condition that, left untreated, could have serious consequences for my health. That was the first step. Men's Health Week is not the only time that we should take the first step. It should be a starting point to taking additional steps that we need to improve our health.
Philip Brett.
Mr. Speaker, last evening Conrad Kirkwood ended his remarkable tenure as President of the Irish Football Association. 5 years of dedication to our game and 5 years of exemplary service. And it is right, Mr. Speaker, that we as a House take this opportunity to thank Conrad for the work that he has done over the past 5 years, ensuring at the heart of all of his dedication was volunteers and the growth of the women's game. Among many of his wonderful achievements, Mr. Speaker, includes the securing of Michael O'Neill as international manager for the next 7 years. overseeing the unprecedented growth in women's football and helping secure the Women's World Cup for Northern Ireland here in 2032. His leadership at the helm of the IFA has been characterised by integrity, humility and an unwavering commitment to the sport that he loves. Whether that was visiting grassroots football clubs across the country or representing Northern Ireland on the international stage, Conrad treated everyone equally. Even while facing his own personal health challenges, he continued to serve with courage and determination, earning the admiration and affection of the entire football community. On behalf of a proud member of the Green and White Army, can I pay tribute to his presidency? As one chapter closes, Mr. Speaker, another opens, and I'm absolutely delighted that Mr. Raymond Kennedy was elected last evening as the new president of the Irish Football Association. We stand at remarkable times for Northern Ireland, Mr. Speaker. When I was in France just 2 weeks ago, we witnessed the youngest ever team play an international game for Northern Ireland. People of all backgrounds, traditions and none coming together to represent their country at the world stage. And Mr. Speaker, let this be the last World Cup that I am in this House and not supporting Northern Ireland. Thank you very much.
Dan Armstrong.
I want to take a moment to mark a truly remarkable milestone in my hometown of Enniskillen. This milestone is the 350th anniversary of Enniskillen Presbyterian Church, one of the oldest Presbyterian communities in Ireland, with roots stretching back to the 1640s and the arrival of the Scottish settlers in Fermanagh during the plantation of Ulster. So beloved has that heritage been that the church has carried the affectionate nickname of the Scots Church ever since. 350 years is an extraordinary span of history, and what strikes me most about this congregation's story is that it is, at its heart, a story about people. It is a story of people who stood firm in the face of controversy, including famously the Great Harmonian Dispute of 1861, when a group of ladies introduced the first such instrument into any Irish Presbyterian church. The uproar that followed shook the General Assembly for a generation. The congregation was reproved, petitioned, and visited by commission after commission, and they refused to move. It took until 1896 for the matter to be settled, and now music is accepted in all churches. I think that's something rather wonderful about the spirit of quiet determination. Yet theirs is also the story of people marked by deep commitment, including the 7 members of this congregation lost in the Enniskillen bomb in 1987. Their memory is carried in the church's beautiful memorial window, and they remain part of the fabric of this community. One of those lost, Nessie Mullen, was described by the church's own speaker as the reason she first felt at home in Enniskillen. Nessie's warmth, shown towards a young teacher who arrived knowing nobody, made all the difference. That is what community means. And it is a story of continuity of generations of families whose generosity and faith have shaped the church we see today. Personally, it has always been my own church, with fond members attending with my parents and the special place where I was married. The Gamble family name also runs through the story like a thread. The Reverend Josiah Gamble became minister here at just 21 years old in 1799. His nephew James went on to co-found one of the world's most recognisable companies, Procter & Gamble, and just recently a blue plaque was unveiled on the Enniskillen street where that connection is proudly marked. It is a reminder that the roots of global stories can often be traced right back to a small community in Fermanagh. Speaker, 350 years is a long time, but what endures is not bricks and mortar. It is the warmth, the welcome, and the service to others that has defined this congregation across the centuries. And I want to wish them every blessing as they step forward to the next chapter. Thank you.
David Honeyford.
Speaker, 10 years ago the UK voted to leave the EU and Northern Ireland was removed from the EU against our will. People will have voted for many different reasons, but people were lied to. They were lied to in that referendum, and whatever way people voted after, everybody can agree that the decade following has been an absolute disaster, a complete act of self-harm, a decade of a failing UK economy, £90 billion of tax revenues that haven't been collected, that's come straight off health and education. Ordinary people who have been hit in their pockets with higher taxation. There's been next to no economic growth on a UK scale. So ordinary people are poor, and we've seen the rise, a real worrying rise of the far right and populism within our communities and dividing our communities. But the biggest cost of Brexit has been instability and scares off investment. Since the Brexit referendum, the UK has had 7 prime ministers, and we've had this assembly collapse twice. Political uncertainty has become normal. But when politics becomes unstable, it's ordinary people that pay the price, and ordinary people are paying the price for the Brexit Party's decisions in this House, and they're willing to pay on ordinary people with the decisions since. Every decision that's come to this House that's had any form of collaboration on dual market access and the benefits that we can gain from having that have been voted down by the DUP, the Ulster Unionist and the TUV. While many families have spent the last decade worse off, the loudest supporters of Brexit have punished them, while we've got the like of Farage appearing to be prospering personally. But 10 years on, the question is not whether Brexit was right or wrong, because the evidence is so clear for everyone to see. The question is now how we move forward, because we find ourselves in that unique position. We find ourselves with dual market access, with the opportunity to sell this region that we all enjoy, to have access to both the UK and the EU markets, and we need to absolutely maximise that opportunity for the best for our people. Don't tell me you want Northern Ireland to work and then do everything you can to possibly stop it. We need more North-South collaboration. We need to see more happening, because it's already happening on East-West basis. We need more happening to grow our economy further. But talk is really cheap, to say it out in news lines, but then whenever you come in here to vote against. So the lesson has got to be, we need less division, we need more stability, and we need more collaboration, and we need to grow our economy to create opportunities for ordinary people and put more money back in their pockets and focus on them and not on ideology. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We must move on. The next item in the order of papers is the second stage of the Charities Amendment Bill, and I call the Minister for Communities to move second stage.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the second stage of the Charities Bill be agreed.
Second stage of the Charities Amendment Bill has been moved in accordance with the convention. The Business Committee has not allocated any time limits in this debate. I call the Minister to open the debate on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Charities are vital to our communities, providing essential support, strengthening social bonds and enriching daily life for thousands of people across Northern Ireland. Through periods of uncertainty and challenge, the community and voluntary sector has stepped forward consistently and compassionately to support those most in need. Across this chamber, many of us will have direct experience of that contribution, whether through volunteering, governance, or simply witnessing the difference charities make in people's lives. Many more of us, and those we represent, are beneficiaries of their work, whether in health, support for children and young people, animal welfare, sport, human rights, environmental protection, and much more. That reach is profound. So too is the responsibility we carry to ensure that the environment in which charities operate enables them to thrive. Public trust and confidence are essential to that. Without it, charitable giving is reduced, participation declines, and the sector's ability to deliver vital services is undermined. The Charities Act 2008 established the foundations for that confidence. It created the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland as the independent regulator, set out a registration framework, and provided powers to protect charitable assets and ensure accountability. However, as with any legislative framework, it must evolve to remain effective. The bill before the Assembly today is about ensuring that our regulatory system is robust, proportionate and fit for purpose in a modern context. It takes forward key recommendations from the Independent Review of Charity Regulation published in January 2022, which identified a number of areas where the legislation could be strengthened, clarified and modernised. This bill implements a focused package of those recommendations, alongside addressing practical issues that have arisen in operation. At its core, the bill has three clear aims. Firstly, to strengthen the Charities Commission regulatory powers, ensuring it can act effectively and proportionately where concerns arise. Secondly, to enable the simplification and modernisation of accounting and reporting requirements, particularly for smaller charities. And thirdly, to provide clarity in areas of legislative uncertainty, including the position of organisations operating across jurisdictions. In doing so, the bill reflects a broader principle that regulations should support and protect the public interest without placing unnecessary burdens on the sector. Charities, particularly smaller volunteer-led organisations, often operate with limited administrative capacity. Where we can simplify requirements without compromising transparency or accountability, it is right that we do so. This allows organisations to focus their time, energy and resources on what matters most, delivering services and supporting communities. The measures within the bill are therefore practical and targeted. They will enhance the Commission's ability to share information and intervene appropriately, including through proportionate tools such as official warnings. They close gaps which currently allow individuals to evade accountability, strengthening protections for charities and their beneficiaries. They also introduce greater flexibility in financial reporting, allowing requirements to be tailored more appropriately, reducing burdens on smaller organisations and ensuring that the system can adapt over time through secondary legislation. Finally, the bill removes provisions which are found to be unworkable, providing clarity and certainty for organisations operating across borders and avoiding unnecessary duplication of regulation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a modest bill in size, but a significant one in impact. It will reinforce public trust, it will modernise our regulatory framework, and it will support a vibrant, confident and effective charity sector, one that continues to deliver enormous social value across Northern Ireland. This bill is something that we should all support, and I commend it to the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I call on the Chair of the Committee, and I call on cont'd now. Over to you, Colin.
I rise to welcome the second stage of the Charities Amendment Bill. At the outset, it is important to place my remarks in context. Second stage is concerned with the general principles of the bill. The committee has received initial briefing from department officials and has been provided with the bill and accompanying material. However, the committee has not yet undertaken its formal evidence-taking, stakeholder engagement or clause-by-clause scrutiny. For that reason, I will not be offering any settled committee view on the detail of individual clauses today. Those matters will be examined properly during committee stage. My comments are therefore directed to the broad policy intent, the issues the committee is likely to want to test, and the importance of ensuring the final legislation is proportionate, workable and clear. So we recognise the importance of the charity sector across the North, absolutely vital, and maintaining services across a range of sectors that we all know the value of. Charities, community organisations, faith-based organisations, voluntary groups and social purpose bodies provide practical support to individuals and families, often in areas where need is greatest. Many are small, volunteer-led and rooted deeply in their local communities. It is therefore essential that charity law provides a framework that protects charitable assets, supports public confidence and enables good governance, while also avoiding unnecessary administrative burden. A regulatory system that is too weak risks undermining public trust. A system that is too heavy can divert scarce time and money away from frontline delivery. In broad terms, the bill seeks to modernise aspects of the Charities Act 2008. The Department has indicated the bill gives effect to recommendations from the Independent Review of Charity Regulation and is intended to strengthen proportionate regulatory powers, streamline accounting and reporting requirements, and remove provisions that have proved difficult or unworkable. The Committee welcomes the opportunity to consider legislation that seeks to update and improve the regulatory framework. We also note the Department carried out a further public consultation which closed on 24th of April 2026 and attracted 38 responses, and that a number of amendments were made to the bill before introduction in response to issues raised. One of the broad themes of the bill is the strengthening and clarification of the Charity Commission's regulatory powers. The Committee recognises that an effective regulator needs to have a range of proportionate tools. In many circumstances, a graduated regulatory response may be more appropriate than moving immediately to the most formal or intrusive intervention available. However, the Committee will want to examine carefully how any new or amended powers would operate in practice. Powers relating to information sharing, official warnings, directions, removal from office and disqualification can have significant long-standing consequences for charities, trustees, staff, volunteers and indeed public confidence in the sector. The Committee will therefore wish to test whether the proposed safeguards are sufficient. That includes issues such as prior notice, the opportunity to make representations, publication, decisions, rights of appeal, data protection safeguards, review mechanisms, consistency of decision making and the practical guidance that will be available to charities and trustees. This is not to suggest opposition to the broad aim of strengthening effective regulation. Rather, it reflects the Committee's role in ensuring the balance is right, robust enough to protect charitable assets and the public interest, but fair, transparent and proportionate in its application. A second important theme is the intention to reduce unnecessary bureaucracy for smaller charities. The Committee has already heard that many small organisations face real pressures in meeting administrative, accounting and reporting requirements. For volunteer-led organisations, compliance effort often falls on a very small number of people who are already delivering services, raising funds and supporting their communities. The bill appears to create scope for a more flexible and tiered approach to accounting, reporting and independent examination requirements. The Committee welcomed the general policy aim of making regulation more proportionate to the size, complexity and risk profile of charities. That said, the community will need to examine the detail of how this will be achieved. In particular, members will want to understand the proposed use of regulations, the level of Assembly oversight, the timing of secondary legislation, and how charities will be supported through any transition to those new arrangements. The Committee will also want to ensure that simplification does not unintentionally reduce transparency or weaken public confidence. The key issue will be whether the bill can reduce avoidable administrative drag while retaining the level of financial assurance that the public, donors, beneficiaries and indeed funders are entitled to expect. A further theme then is clarity. The bill proposes to remove provisions which, according to the Department, have not proved workable in practice. The Committee will wish to explore the implications of those changes, including for organisations operating across jurisdictions or delivering charitable activity in or from the North here. Our own charity sector includes a diverse range of bodies. Some are very small, very local. Others operate on a regional, cross-border or England, Scotland, Wales and 6-county-wide basis. The Committee will therefore want to be satisfied that the final legislative framework is clear, avoids unnecessary duplication and does not create unintended regulatory gaps or consequences. Clarity matters not only for the regulator but also for trustees, staff, volunteers, funders, professional advisors and members of the public. If the law is difficult to understand or apply, compliance becomes more difficult and confidence can be weakened. So the Committee will also need to consider implementation. Legislative modernisation will only be effective if it can be delivered in practice. That means clear guidance, suitable systems, proportionate processes and sufficient capacity within the Charity Commission and the Department. The Department's material indicates that implementation may involve one-off capital and resource costs for the Commission. The Committee will want to examine whether those estimates are realistic and whether the proposed timetable is deliverable, and whether charities will receive timely and accessible guidance before substantive changes take effect. In particular, smaller organisations should not be left to interpret complex changes without practical support. A modern framework should be understandable, accessible and capable of being implemented consistently. In conclusion, in relation to my chair role, the Committee welcomes the broad intent of the Charities Amendment Bill. The bill presents an opportunity to modernise charity regulation, support public trust, strengthen oversight and reduce unnecessary burden on smaller charities. However, the bill has not yet completed its scrutiny. The committee has not yet completed our scrutiny of the bill, and will therefore reserve judgment on the detail of specific clauses until committee stage, when members will take evidence from the Department, the Charity Commission, umbrella bodies, professional advisors and the wider sector. The committee's focus will be on whether the bill strikes the right balance between effective regulation and practical proportionality, whether the safeguards are sufficient, whether delegated powers are appropriately framed, and whether implementation will be realistic for both the regulator and the sector. On that basis, I welcome the bill's progression to committee stage and look forward to detailed, evidence-based scrutiny of its provision. So, lastly, I'll just make some very brief remarks as Sinn Féin spokesperson. The previous Communities Minister, Deirdre Hargey, commissioned an independent review of charity regulation from 2021 to 2022. The findings of that review set out 93 recommendations for the Department, the Charity Commission and the charity sector. In response to those findings, Minister Hargey introduced the Charities Bill, which was implemented in 2022. The legislation put in place many of the review's priority recommendations within the limited time remaining in the last mandate. The proposed Charities Amendment Bill now represents the next stage of that reform programme. It seeks to give effect to a further 18 recommendations from the independent review. The Bill's 14 clauses collectively aim to strengthen the statutory framework, enhance regulatory clarity and ensure that the Charity Commission can operate with the transparency expected of a regulator. Reduced bureaucracy is welcome. However, this cannot come at the cost of undermining regulation. The legislation must help ensure transparency around funding, income and overall financial accountability. It's important that the Minister engage directly with counterparts in the South to ensure the provisions under Clause 8 and 9 are aligned and strengthened. As this bill moves into committee stage, I want to look specifically at the repeal of Section 167 of the Charities Act. While the provision was never enacted, its repeal will mean that a charity registered in the South or in Britain will not have to re-register with the local Charities Commission if it's registered and regulated in another jurisdiction. While I would be supportive of the smooth operation of charities across jurisdictions, I would want clarity as to whether this might enable larger charities operating across jurisdictions any unfair advantage compared to small local charities who have to compete with those larger charities for funding and who also have to register with our local Charities Commission here. I think it must be noted that while many of the proposals are positive, the decision to only subject the proposal to a 4-week consultation is not an ideal way to do business, particularly as it limits the time in which those small local charities with less resources can engage and contribute. So that's something that we will look at in the time ahead. Sinn Féin, will work with all parties on the Communities Committee to scrutinise this legislation and ensure we deliver a bill that truly supports charities right across the North.
I call him Mark Durkin. Mark.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I welcome the opportunity to speak today, but before turning to the detail of the legislation, and it won't even be that much detail in the legislation or the debate today at second stage, I want to begin by paying tribute to our charity sector. Across every constituency, charities are providing support to change and save lives every single day. They help families through poverty, support people living with disability, help tackle loneliness, improve mental health, and provide countless other services and supports that strengthen our communities. Too often, they are the safety net when every other safety net has failed. Today's bill, as the Chair has outlined, is a product of a process that began back in early 2021 when the then Minister commissioned the independent review of charity regulation. That review involved an extensive engagement exercise with charities, regulators and funders aimed at creating a more modern and proportionate regulatory system. Although today's bill, or the bill we're talking about today, includes or addresses 18 of those 92 recommendations, I'd like from the Minister, maybe when he's winding, just some clarity as to where we are regarding the 92 implementations, where addressing this 18 will take us. We're aware that there will be further legislation required and is coming, we're promised, in a future mandate, but we just need to know where we are in this process and on this journey. I'd also like to hear from him what progress has been made in speeding up the registration process, because I know that's something that the review was very critical of, and it's something that we'll all have heard, I suppose, from charities or prospective charities in our own constituencies. The broad principles behind this bill are sensible in our view. Changes to it will modernise charity regulation, strengthen the Charity Commission's ability to intervene where misconduct or mismanagement occurs, improve information sharing, and importantly, reduce unnecessary red tape, particularly for those smaller charities with limited administrative capacity. Many volunteer-led organisations simply don't have the capacity that larger organisations enjoy or employ. Every hour spent filling out paperwork is an hour not being spent delivering services and support to those who rely on them. But, Deputy Speaker, we should also be honest about where the greatest pressures facing the charity sector now lie. The greatest challenge confronting charities today isn't regulation, it's sustainability. When the review was commenced in 2021, many organisations were still in the midst of responding to the pandemic, and since then they've faced a succession of new and evolving challenges. The ending of European funding programmes has left a significant gap that so many in our communities relied on for decades. The Local Growth Fund has failed to match both the scale and certainty of what has been lost. For many charities, funding has become short-term and unreliable, and the consequences of that are visible across every constituency. Organisations have had to strip back staffing levels to the bare minimum. Experienced staff have been lost to the sector altogether, and community projects that had become embedded in neighbourhoods have disappeared, sadly. Some have had to close their doors entirely. So whilst the SDLP certainly support legislation that removes unnecessary bureaucracy, we shouldn't kid ourselves that administrative reform alone will secure the future of charities and organisations within the voluntary and community sector. These measures are certainly worthwhile, but proportionate regulation must be matched by proportionate investment and support. The Executive need to recognise charities as trusted partners, delivering services that improve and, as I said, often save the public purse money in the long run as well. Deputy Speaker, this bill is a positive step and it should make life easier, particularly for many smaller organisations, and we certainly have, the SDLP have no hesitation supporting its progress to committee stage, where I look forward to working with my colleagues in committee to ensure careful scrutiny of its provisions. The Chair's outlined a few areas that we will need to explore, and certainly a few assurances that we'll be seeking as well. So we look forward to doing that, but we also mustn't lose sight of that bigger picture as well.
Thank you, Mark. I call on Pam Cameron. Pam.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to speak at the second stage of the Charities Amendment Bill today as a member of the Communities Committee. So I thank the Minister and also the Chair of Committee for outlining the detail of the bill as introduced. And at the outset, I want to recognise the enormous contribution made by charities, churches, community groups, sports clubs, youth organisations, older people's groups and volunteers throughout Northern Ireland. They do an incredible work, and in South Antrim I see that contribution every week. Many are run by local volunteers, trustees and committee members who give their time to help others, support vulnerable people and keep community life going. So charity regulation obviously does matter very much, and the public must have confidence that charitable funds are used properly and that trustees understand their responsibilities, that there's effective oversight where misconduct or mismanagement occurs. However, regulation must also be proportionate, and it must not overwhelm small charities with bureaucracy, discourage people from becoming trustees, or make it harder for volunteers to carry out work that benefits our local communities. The bill seeks to strike that balance, and any action to reduce administrative burden on charities is, of course, very much welcomed. The bill makes targeted amendments to the Charities Act Northern Ireland 2008 to ensure that the framework is modern, proportionate and effective. It progresses 18 recommendations from the independent review of charity regulation with a focus on a more risk-based approach that promotes trust and accountability without placing undue burdens on charities. A key part of the bill is strengthening the Charity Commission's ability to intervene proportionately where this misconduct or mismanagement. The vast majority of charities operate in good faith and with integrity. However, where serious issues arise, the regulator must have the tools to protect charitable assets and uphold public trust. So I welcome the safeguards included in the bill where powers affect individuals or organisations. There are provisions around power notice, representations, review mechanisms and appeal routes. Stronger powers must always be matched by fairness and proportionality. I welcome the streamlining of accounting and reporting requirements. For small charities, administration can be a real challenge and a real burden. Trustees are often balancing employment, family responsibilities and voluntary service. So they need systems that are clear, manageable and proportionate to the size and complexity of the organisation. And the bill also, it's worth noting, repeals section 167, providing clarity for institutions established elsewhere but operating for charitable purposes in or from Northern Ireland. The Department did, of course, consult on key issues, including template reporting and section 167, and carried out a 4-week consultation on the bill. I recognise that this sought to balance engagement with the time left in the mandate, and responses were broadly supportive with amendments made to improve proportionality and safeguards. Deputy Speaker, this bill is not about regulation for regulation's sake. It's about protecting public confidence, supporting good governance and ensuring that the framework works better for charities, trustees, volunteers and the public. So for those reasons, I support the general principles of the bill through to second stage and look forward to the committee scrutinising the bill further. Thank you.
Pam, I call on Kelly Armstrong. Kelly.
Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to speak at consideration stage of the Charities Amendment Bill on behalf of the Alliance Party and to reflect on the important progress that has been made since the consultation phase by the Department. At its heart, this bill is about getting the balance right. It recognises the vital contribution that charities and voluntary organisations make across Northern Ireland, often stepping in where statutory services cannot, and it seeks to ensure that the regulatory framework supporting them is both robust and proportionate. I am pleased the Department has taken account of the consultation responses it received in regards to this bill. The outcome of the consultation recognised that while transparency and accountability are essential, the existing system can at times place unnecessary administrative burdens on charities, particularly the smaller volunteer-led organisations, and those burdens can divert time, energy and resources away from frontline services that the community and this Assembly depend upon. As I've said, the bill responds constructively to the concerns raised by consultees. It introduces sensible amendments to improve the functioning of the Charity Commission, to provide greater clarity in decision making and to ensure that charitable organisations are treated fairly and consistently. Importantly, it also aims to rebuild confidence in the regulatory system, both for charities themselves and for the public who support them. The bill will provide a system where charities are supported to thrive, innovate and respond to need, while still operating within a framework that guarantees appropriate oversight. We must remember that the strength of Northern Ireland's voluntary and community sector lies in its diversity, from large regional organisations to small local groups rooted deeply in their communities. Any legislative framework must be flexible enough to reflect that diversity, and this bill does certainly move us closer to that goal. However, legislation alone is not enough. Effective implementation and ongoing engagement with the sector will be key. and it's vital that the Charity Commission operates with transparency, proportionality and responsiveness going forward. I do have a few questions I hope the Minister may be able to address during his wind later, but it will certainly highlight the type of things that I will be bringing forward as I expect this bill will go to committee stage. On page 2, line 14, relating to official warnings by the Commission, updates the Charity Act 2008 by confirming warnings can be issued by post. I'm confused about just by post. Surely in order to future-proof this legislation, warnings should be considered to be able to be released digitally. Then moving on to page 3, section 4, line 8 and 9, and then page 4, section 6, line 11. There's a reference to the Charity Commission having the power to remove a person from their employment. I appreciate if anyone has been involved in wrongdoing, they should not be permitted to continue in that role. However, Deputy Speaker, it would be helpful to understand how the Charity Commission can sack an employee when they are not the employer. The contract of employment will be between the employee and the charity they are employed by. So what powers does the Charity Commission have that negates pre-existing employment laws? I'm also surprised, and I know it wasn't in the recommendations, that this bill does not take opportunity to clarify when the Charity Commission vests property, who then owns that property? Does it become the property of the Charity Commission? During the last mandate, the then Committee for Communities, which I sat on, heard allegations, and I have to say they were allegations because as committee we couldn't investigate them, that property vested by the Charity Commission that was reported to be worth a significant amount of money was not accounted for. It would have been useful to set out how vested property is handled by the Charity Commission. And Mr Deputy Speaker, it would be useful to hear from the Minister what happens when Section 11 takes effect and the Charities Act is amended to repeal Section 167. Does this mean charities that operate in Northern Ireland but whose headquarters are elsewhere will now have to register in Northern Ireland, or will their charity registration from elsewhere in the UK be accepted? Mr Deputy Speaker, prior to coming to this House, I worked for many years for a 167 charity, the Community Transport Association. It would be useful to understand, or useful to that organisation, and others like it, to know if the Department will inform funding bodies that this organisation can apply for grants here in Northern Ireland if it is not required to re-register here again. The next issue may be able to be clarified quite quickly by the Minister. In Section 12 on page 6, line 25, why is the bill amending the Charities Act to remove reference to the Department for Communities by omitting the words for communities? Does this mean that any department can make regulations relating to which charities are exempted from regulation? Very simple piece, but just how that legislation works. And finally, if the Minister could confirm that commencement of 13.2 on page 6, line 33 and 34 will happen well in advance of the financial year, or a financial year, to enable charities to be ready for change. Mr Deputy Speaker, I expect the bill will pass second stage easily here today and move to the Committee for Scrutiny. I look forward to working with the Department, the Minister and the rest of my colleagues on the Communities Committee to support the timely delivery of this legislation in this mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I call on Andy Allen. Andy.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And before I begin my substantive remarks, I would wish to declare an interest as a trustee of a charity. Through that role, Deputy Speaker, I've seen firsthand the valuable work carried out by charities and the responsibilities that fall on trustees in ensuring organisations are properly governed. Every day, as other members have mentioned, Northern Ireland's charitable sector makes an enormous contribution to our society. Charities strengthen communities, provide opportunities and deliver services that many individuals and families rely upon. Much of that work is carried out by dedicated volunteers and trustees who give their time freely and often without recognition. Any regulatory framework must protect beneficiaries and charitable assets, maintain public confidence in the sector and encourage people to continue stepping forward to serve their communities. The bill seeks to implement recommendations arising from the independent review of charity regulation, and overall, we believe those are worthwhile objectives. As members will know, the review made 93 recommendations, 18 of which are being taken forward through this legislation. Many of those recommendations sought to create a more proportionate and risk-based approach to regulation, whilst improving the relationship between the regulator and the sector itself. The Department states that the bill seeks to make charity law clearer, fairer and more fit for purpose. In doing so, it aims to strengthen the Charity Commission's regulatory powers, streamline accounting and reporting requirements, and remove legislative provisions that have created uncertainty or are no longer required. Those are sensible objectives and, in broad terms, ones that we can support. Many of the proposals will bring Northern Ireland more closely into line with developments elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Public trust is one of the charitable sector's most important assets, and where there is misconduct or mismanagement, regulators must have appropriate powers available to intervene and protect both beneficiaries and public confidence. We therefore understand the rationale behind the measures contained within the bill. We also recognise the logic behind provisions intended to prevent individuals from avoiding regulatory action simply by resigning before a decision can be taken. Whilst we support the principles underpinning the bill, there are several areas that we believe warrant careful scrutiny as the legislation progresses. One such area is the proposed official warnings regime. We can see the value of having a proportionate tool available where a full statutory inquiry may not be necessary or indeed appropriate. Similar powers already exist elsewhere in the UK. However, an official warning has the potential to carry significant reputational consequences for a charity, the trustees and the wider sector trust. Publication of a warning could affect public confidence, fundraising activity and relationships with funders and stakeholders. We note that stakeholders, including NICFA, have expressed support for the introduction of an official warning regime in principle, whilst also highlighting the potential significant reputational consequences that the publication of a warning could have for a charity. That concern is understandable and further underlines the importance of ensuring that the power is exercised proportionately and with appropriate safeguards. Whilst the bill contains safeguards including prior notice and an opportunity to make representations, we believe it is important that we understand clearly how this power will be used in practice. In particular, we would like to understand the circumstances in which the Commission would normally publish a warning and how it intends to distinguish between serious misconduct and matters that may be more appropriately addressed through guidance, advice, support or regulatory engagement. We also note the expansion of the Commission's powers to share information with bodies exercising public or regulatory functions. Effective cooperation between regulators is important and can help protect charitable assets and prevent wrongdoing. It will be important to understand how those powers will cooperate in practice, which organisations may fall within their scope, and what safeguards will be in place to ensure that the information sharing remains proportionate. Perhaps the most significant issue for scrutiny relates to the extent to which important operational detail is being transferred from primary legislation into regulations. The bill gives the Department and in some cases the Commission greater flexibility in relation to accounting requirements, annual reporting arrangements and the definition of gross income. There are obvious advantages to having flexibility and allowing requirements to evolve over time. However, flexibility must be balanced with accountability. We note, as indicated during the Committee's pre-legislative briefing from officials, that regulations flowing from these provisions will be subject to the draft affirmative procedure, and I would ask the Minister just to reaffirm that. That is welcome. That is a welcome safeguard and will ensure Assembly scrutiny of future changes. However, it will remain important that charities themselves are properly consulted before significant changes are introduced. The bill also seeks to reduce administrative burdens on smaller charities. Many organisations operate with limited resources and depend heavily upon volunteers. Measures that reduce unnecessary bureaucracy should be welcomed where they allow charities to focus more of their time and resources on supporting beneficiaries. The proposal to remove the requirement for an independent examination of accounts for charities with a gross annual income below $20,000 is one example. We note the broad support for this proposal from across the sector, particularly given the difficulties some smaller charities experience in securing independent examination and the costs that can arise. We understand the intentions behind the changes, particularly for charities with limited resources, but it is also again important that we are satisfied it strikes the correct balance between reducing administrative burden and maintaining public confidence in the stewardship of charitable funds. We note and welcome the proposal to repeal Section 167 of the 2008 Act relating to institutions established outside Northern Ireland. This is a matter that was repeatedly raised by a number of affected charities during committee engagement in the previous mandate. We understand that Section 167 was never commenced and that such organisations will continue to be regulated within their home jurisdiction. Nevertheless, it will be useful to understand how concerns relating to such organisations, where they or should they arise, will be addressed in practice, and how cooperation between regulators will operate should issues arise. We also note the extension of automatic disqualification provisions, which appear intended to bring Northern Ireland into line with arrangements elsewhere, or already operating elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Similarly, the proposed protection powers available during a statutory inquiry are understandable in principle where there is evidence of misconduct or mismanagement. However, I have no doubt that the committee will wish to satisfy itself that appropriate safeguards and oversight accompany the use of those powers. Overall, we believe the bill contains a number of sensible and potentially beneficial reforms. It seeks to strengthen public confidence in charity regulation, provide the Charity Commission with proportionate enforcement tools, and reduce unnecessary burdens on smaller charities. The challenge for the Assembly will be ensuring that we strike the right balance between effective regulation and proportionality, between accountability and fairness, and between protecting public confidence and supporting the thousands of volunteers, trustees and charities that serve communities across Northern Ireland every day. I look forward to examining the detail of the bill further during committee stage, and on that basis, Mr Deputy Speaker, we are content to support the bill progressing to committee stage.
Thank you, Mr Allen. And as Mr Bradley's just walked out the door, who was the next speaker due? Minister, over to you.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I thank members for their contributions to today's debate and for the constructive tone in which they have been conducted. I look forward to seeing this piece of legislation progress. I think we've set a high bar, though. The last time we passed legislation in this House was obviously the Sign Language Bill. After we passed that, there was unbridled joy outside in the Great Hall. There were great celebrations. I don't know if the Charities Bill will generate the same interest and levels of excitement out there, but let us try anyway. Let's work together to make sure that we get the best piece of legislation that we can. I want to address some of the comments that were made, and Mr Gildernew, as Chair of the Committee, was right to say that this debate is about the general principles of the bill, and on it does seem that we have clear agreement, or at least enough agreement so that we can get to the next stage, so that this can go to a committee. But can I assure him that I agree with many of the comments that have been made? I certainly welcome and want to see the scrutiny. There are a number of things within the legislation that will be different, that I believe will help to improve the regulatory framework that we have here for our charities in Northern Ireland. But it is right that the committee takes that time to examine it properly, and that is something that I welcome, including on the issues of how this Assembly and the committee will oversight some of the issues that come about as a result of the legislative changes that we hope to make, how we can ensure that legislation, especially the secondary legislation, is put in the right and proper way, how we can make sure that it does what we actually want it to do, which makes sure we don't have unnecessary duplication, and that it is implemented in a clear and easily understandable way. So I certainly agree with the comments that he has made, and I can assure the Chairman and the Committee that I will engage in good faith and ensure that we have the answers to the questions that we need. I just want to raise or respond rather to a few other queries that were raised. First of all, from Mr Dirk, and he'd asked a couple of questions in particular. First, around registration and the processes around registration thresholds. I can assure him those are being taken forward, and we will have the regulations after the summer recess. Those will be in two parts, but again, we hope That will be in place so that those not having to avail of registration can apply for that from autumn 2026, and that we've deregistration from April 2027. He's right to highlight there were 93 recommendations within the independent review. As he rightly points out, 18 are taken forward in this part of the legislation. Others will require further legislation, which I trust will come in the next mandate, but I can confirm to him that 60 of those have already been addressed either by the Department or the Commission in separate ways, so I hope that those answer his questions. Moving on to Kelly Armstrong, as I've said previously, this is about the general principles of the bill. So what does Kelly Armstrong do? We go straight into clause 3, paragraph 4, and an issue about whether or not the information can be provided by post. I can assure the member that all of these issues will be addressed properly through the committee stage, but I would just draw to her attention the fact that the legislation says may be given by post, not necessarily shall be given by post. I believe that that gives great enough flexibility so that we can look at those. However, I have no doubt that as a very assiduous member of the committee, these will be raised during the committee process as well.
Minister, your assiduousness and Ms Kelly's assiduous is duly noted.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. That is much appreciated. I will, though, address some of her other points as well. She'd raised some concern around the employment issue as well. This already is in the 2008 Act. There is an ability for that action to be taken. The amendment that we are trying to make here, if I can draw members' attention to clause 4 on the second page, is where the Commission has given notice under subsection 9 of its intention to make an order, under subsection 2, removing a person from an office or employment. So this already is in the legislation. It does say that the Commission may proceed to make the order even though the person has ceased to hold the office or employment. And this is similar with what we're trying to do with trustees. Just because you leave your position as a trustee, or if you leave your position within that charity as someone that holds an office or has employment in the office, the Commissioner is still able to make a determination to say, even though you have left, we are still making this order, to try and bring in some form of additional accountability. So that is to level that up in the same way as it's being done with trustees. But again, this is something that we can discuss further through the proper committee process as well. She had also talked about a reference within the legislation to remove the Department for Communities. This is to tidy up the 2008 Act. It already refers to communities, so it's essentially a tidying up act on that one as well. And hopefully that has addressed most of the points that she has made, but we will come back on some of those other ones. There was one rather on 167. I would simply make the point that that was never enacted in the first place, and there was the understanding from many of our consultee responses that Section 167, if it ever was brought in, would be ambiguous legally. It would create duplication, and it was strongly opposed. People felt that it would require major new infrastructure in return for what is relatively insignificant benefit, and it cannot deliver some of the perceived tax or funding benefits. So repeal was considered to be preferable, but of course those charities can continue operating as they do now, because the clause within the legislation was never enacted, so they can continue to do what they are doing now. If they want to constitute as a Northern Ireland only charity, they are able to do that if they believe that will bring certain benefits. But repeal of Section 167 will mean that such institutions can continue to operate in or from Northern Ireland as they currently do, but they may choose to separately constitute as a Northern Ireland charity should they judge that to be beneficial for them. But it was very, very clear from the consultation responses that we had received that that was the right way forward. I also agree with what Andy Allen has said in terms of ensuring that we are appropriate and proportionate in the actions that we take, and that there is that battle, if you like, between flexibility and accountability, and it is right and proper that we do the work around that. I'm happy to assist the committee in that. He also spoke about the official warning. I'm more than happy for the committee to properly examine and investigate what this would look like. However, we do have the benefit of seeing what that was like and what it has done already in England and Wales. Over the course of a year, I think they receive or have to issue around 40 of those letters. That's 40 for a total number of charities, which I think is in the region of 180,000. We have about 7,500 charities in Northern Ireland, so you'd expect to issue a very small number of those. And oftentimes, as those are issued, before those are issued, some of the issues that have been raised that caused those letters to be issued then actually get tackled and sorted out. So this is about giving us another step before you go to that full-on next phase of an inquiry, whatever else might come after. It's an additional step, but we're absolutely right to take our time to consider it and make sure that it is proportionate. And again, just to actually confirm to him that the resolutions, the regulations that he talked about in terms of accounting and reports, they will not be draft affirmative, they're negative resolution, as they are technical in nature. But if he wants to explore that further during the committee process, I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to give way on that one.
Minister, I watched back, as unfortunately I wasn't at the committee briefing on this, and unless my memory fails me, I picked up that the officials at that time stated that they would be draft affirmative, and perhaps committee colleagues could either confirm or deny that. So on that basis, can the Minister advise whether that is a change?
I don't believe that is. That maybe was picked up wrong, but we're happy to look at that and explore that. But that's the information that I have on this. But again, this is where we have the committee process in place and consideration stage of the legislation, so we can look into that. And I will be happy to ensure before that begins that we provide that information to the committee and that is clarified. And apologies if that was anything from our end that caused a misunderstanding on that point. So lots of issues raised, Mr Deputy Speaker, but I am aware this is second stage. This is about general principles, and I think on progression to the next stage there is clear agreement across the Chamber on the importance of a strong and trusted charity sector and on the need for regulation that both protects the public and supports charities to do their work. And this bill, I believe, does strike that balance, strengthens oversight where needed, while reducing unnecessary burdens, particularly for smaller organisations. And I think that this is worthy of noting, because oftentimes we can think what we do in this place is just add more bureaucracy, more form filling, more regulation, and making it more difficult for charities to do what they want to do. But actually, what we're doing today is reducing that administrative burden. Doesn't happen often. It has to be balanced with accountability, but that is something that is very, very positive and will be welcomed by many charities. And so I'm happy to give way again. Yep.
When the Minister referenced about the administrative burden, and I know he may come back and say we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but has he any thoughts at this stage around audit thresholds? I know this bill seeks to take the powers around that flexibility, but he had any thoughts around where he believes they should be?
Yes, I do. I'm happy to share those as well, because this has been an issue that has been raised in this chamber. It's been raised through assembly questions as well. My position is we want to make it as simple and straightforward for people. We need to have accountability, but at the same time we can't have burdensome regulations on people that make it more difficult to do what it is that they are doing. I certainly don't want to be in the position where we're putting people off either. What we have within the legislation, though, is something that will be not only through the legislation but the regulations that we're bringing forward as well. That will help massively for people to decide if they're under a certain threshold whether they register at all, and if they do register and they want the benefits from being registered, that there will be far less reporting requirements on them. Audit is another stage further as well, but I understand the concerns that have been raised around that. So essentially, I want to be clear. I think this is a good piece of legislation that will benefit charities across Northern Ireland, but I fully respect and value the importance of committee scrutiny in this way, and if we can improve the bill, let us do that, and I'm happy to work together with others. Mr Deputy Speaker, I hope I have raised or dealt with the issues that have been raised by members here today. If there's anything that I haven't picked up, I commit to writing to individual members, and I will copy the committee into that as well, and I look forward to seeing this legislation move through the legislative process. Thank you.
The question is that the second stage of the Charities Amendment Bill be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Any contraries? The ayes have it. That concludes the second stage of the Charities Amendment Bill. The bill stands referred to the Committee for Communities. Ladies and gentlemen, just dwell a few moments while we move around. Thank you, Minister. Next Minister here. Good.
Members are going to ask you to just take your ease for a moment. Members, the next item on the order paper is the second stage of the Harbours Bill. I call the Minister for Infrastructure to move the second stage. Minister.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The second stage of the Harbours Bill has been moved in accordance with convention. The Business Committee has not allocated any time limits on this debate. I call the Minister to open the debate on the bill.
The Harbours Bill, which I bring before you all today, represents a significant and necessary reform of the legislative framework governing our trust ports and harbour authorities. This bill is the first step in implementing updates arising from a comprehensive review of trust ports. That review identified a number of challenges faced by my department, trust ports and harbour authorities. The measures before you today are designed to enable these bodies to operate more efficiently, to strengthen their contribution to the regional economy and ensure that they can compete effectively with other ports. I am grateful for the opportunity to put the bill before you today. In December 2024, my department launched a 12-week consultation on a range of policy proposals aimed at modernising the existing legislative framework. These proposals focus on the powers, status and governance of the trust ports, including whether trust port status remains appropriate for major commercial ports here, whether ports should be granted enhanced commercial powers, whether trust ports require powers to ensure proper discharge of their marine safety obligations, and whether the processes for preparing and approving harbour orders should be updated. The consultation, which closed on the 10th of March 2025, generated 60 responses, and I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge the individuals and the organisations who contributed their views and helped inform our policy development. Following this process, I agreed policy recommendations which were also agreed by my ministerial colleagues in the Executive on the 6th of November 2025. These included retaining the trust port model, pursuing legislative change to address the current Office for National Statistics classification, and introducing enhanced commercial powers. They also included provisions for the power of harbour direction for ports, as well as updated purposes for which harbour orders may be made. I wish to emphasise that this bill is firmly grounded in the policy proposals agreed. It represents a measured and balanced package of reforms designed to modernise our ports, unlock their full commercial potential whilst retaining appropriate safeguards in the public interest. Our ports play a vital role in the regional economy, and the trust port model operating and for the wider community, operating for the benefit of stakeholders, has served the North of Ireland well. This bill does not seek to replace that model, but rather to update and modernise it for the future. In doing so, the bill addresses a number of long-standing issues relating to governance, control and their ONS accounting status. All of these issues are central to their ability to operate as effective operation ports. Specifically, the bill removes my department's power to compel the sale of a trust port. This is an important step in protecting the independence and long-term stability of our ports, signalling clearly that they are not subject to undue governance intervention. In addition, the bill repeals the department's power to issue directions to trust ports in the exercise of their statutory functions. This ensures that responsibility for day-to-day operations and strategic decision-making rests firmly with the ports themselves. Alongside these measures, supporting secondary legislation will amend governance arrangements, including reducing the department's role in appointing board members from a majority to a minority position. This will maintain an appropriate level of public accountability, and in addition to this, my intention as Minister to retain ministerial councillor appointments. Taken together, these measures strike an important balance. They reduce indicators of public sector control whilst preserving appropriate oversight, an essential step in seeking ONS reclassification so that trust ports are no longer treated as public corporations where such classification is no longer appropriate. While ONS classification has no legal impact on the statutory powers, functions or ownership of trust ports in the North, it has significant practical implications. Currently, port borrowing requires capital budget cover from the department, placing port investment in direct competition with departmental spending priorities. Reclassification breaks the link between port borrowing and departmental budgets, enabling greater financial autonomy for the ports, which is more appropriate for the commercial environment they operate within. Turning to the commercial aspects of the bill, our ports operate in an increasingly competitive environment. It is essential that they have the flexibility and the tools required to succeed. This bill therefore amends the Harbours Act NI 1970 to better align our legislation with our counterparts in Britain. These changes include allowing harbour authorities to delegate certain functions while safeguarding key powers, expanding the purposes for which harbour orders may be made, and broadening the scope of commercial and investment harbour-related activities, including removing the requirement for ministerial approval. Importantly, the bill also provides ports with a general power of harbour direction in relation to their own operations, reinforcing the principle that boards should be empowered to manage their affairs effectively and independently. Taken as a whole, this bill delivers on three key objectives. First, it enhances the independence of trust ports by removing outdated controls that are no longer appropriate. Secondly, it supports ONS reclassification, ensuring that the governance framework reflects the true nature of the ports. And thirdly, it empowers our ports commercially, equipping them with the tools they need to compete, to grow and contribute to the regional economy. The bill will be supported in part by subordinate legislation, specifically 4 harbour orders covering the ports of Belfast, Coleraine, Foyle and Wormpoint. These will provide ports with further enhanced commercial powers, whilst ensuring that activities remain aligned with port-related objectives and protect the long-term financial sustainability of each port. This is a carefully considered and balanced package, reflecting the realities of the modern maritime sector and the strategic importance of our ports to trade, invest and regional development. Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd be very happy to address any questions the members may have.
Minister, thank you. I call Peter Martin, Chair of the Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And as the Minister has just indicated, the bill does seek to modernise the legislative governance framework for Northern Ireland's trust ports to enable them to more efficiently operate and strengthen their contribution to our very important regional economy. The committee has received oral evidence from both the Department and Belfast Harbour Commissioners to understand greater the underlying issues that impact the operations of our harbours and to examine the Department's plans to introduce reforms. In the course of this evidence, the committee noted that this issue has been historically on the Department's radar for quite a while, all the way back to 2006, and in its public consultation it was flagged up in 2014. More recently, the committee noted the Department's publication of its recent consultation, which closed on the 10th of March 2025, and at its meeting on the 10th of September 2025, the committee received oral evidence from departmental officials on the key findings of the consultation and whether the case for reform remains. During my time chairing the committee, there has been a number of discussions around the need for reform. Therefore, I warmly welcome the bill's introduction and the opportunities that it should unlock if it passes second stage today. As the Minister has just reflected, the central objective or tenet of the bill is really to reclassify the ONS statistics. That would allow Trustports greater financial autonomy by removing the current link between borrowing and departmental budgets. During its previous oral evidence, the committee noted that currently any borrowing by Trustports, regardless of the source of funds, are counted against the Department for Infrastructure's Capital Departmental Expenditure Limit, or CDEL. As a consequence, as the Minister probably only too well knows, this requires budget cover by the Department that in essence means that it competes with other capital projects that are delivered either through the Department or its arm's-length bodies. The bill will retain the Trustport model, therefore there will be no changes to ownership or status, and the relevant ports will remain independent statutory bodies operating for the benefit of stakeholders with profits reinvested locally. It also seeks to rebalance a level of government control by removing certain powers currently held by the Department, including direction and control over the appointment of board positions, to support the case for reclassification by ONS. Additionally, the bill provides for enhanced commercial powers to allow ports to operate on a more competitive footing with ports in the rest of the UK and Ireland, and introduces powers for harbour directions to enable harbour authorities to issue enforceable directions to vessels for maritime safety purposes. And lastly, it includes reforms for harbour orders, which aim to streamline the processes to afford ports greater flexibility in initiating and progressing changes. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will now speak as... nope, not yet. I see my red lines through here. I'm not quite there yet, but I know people are getting excited. Understandably, through its provisions, the bill seeks to unlock a number of benefits which will provide greater investment capacity, enable greater flexibility and enhance the contribution of our ports to long-term economic growth and some decarbonisation goals. From the committee evidence received to date, we note the strong case for reform, but when undertaking scrutiny, it will, and I refer to the committee, undoubtedly wish to examine the impact of departmental oversight whilst ensuring that there is both transparency and accountability, and to examine how relationships and the interests of ports are balanced with those living within our local community, and that is a job of the infrastructure community. I'm confident that the committee will be able to positively engage and work collaboratively with the Department to ensure the bill reflects the current areas where reform is required, and I hope through the committee's scrutiny it will be obviously keen to provide helpful suggestions or enhancements to ensure that the bill reflects and delivers greater long-term benefits for Northern Ireland. Right, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will make some comments as BEP Infrastructure Lead. Mr. Deputy Speaker, certainly we welcome this bill, and I was at the launch of the Belfast Harbour Master Plan, and the Minister was there along with FM and DFM, and also have met the Chief Executive of Belfast Harbour, and I have to say that I had never been in the offices before, but I was stunned by the size of Belfast Harbour. It is absolutely massive. And the amount of shipping that comes in, the amount of foodstuffs that arrive in Belfast, the sheer level of trade is absolutely incredible. And we absolutely do rely on Belfast Harbour to provide us with so much of what we eat and perhaps even buy on a daily basis. And so when I attended that launch, I was particularly impressed by the drive and ambition of the master plan. And it was clear to me as I sat and listened to both the Minister and FM and DFM that so much of what the Harbour was seeking to do was concurrent on this legislation. And what the Minister has said so far, and hopefully what I've said, in terms of unlocking that ambition and potential, we will see that happen through this bill. And that the key thing, or one of the key things in it, is unlocking that CDL expenditure, where actually the Harbour will be able to significantly develop and will not be any more hamstrung by the impact it has on DFI capital budgets. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just want to be clear that I and my DUP colleagues on the committee take our responsibility incredibly seriously, as I know do other members of other parties on that committee. We will take evidence on this bill to ensure, and perhaps I'm going to use a Ron Seal reference, that it does what it says on the tin, that it will deliver the conditions that will ensure greater economic development for Northern Ireland. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would also like to encourage the Department and the Minister to work collaboratively with the committee, and certainly I would welcome more engagement with both the Department and the Minister as the committee perhaps flags up things that perhaps we think would be an improvement on the bill or would enhance it. And as such, I would like to see faster and deeper problem solving. And the committee cannot do that in isolation. That is something we have to do concurrently with the Department. Second stage is about policy intent, and the drivers behind this bill are sound. It should unlock investment and jobs for Northern Ireland, and that's certainly what my party wants to see for our wee country. We are not content with just average or sometimes even poor legislation, as that, as we have seen in other bills before this Assembly, can have negative, unintended consequences in the future. I want to be clear that we will do our best to ensure that this bill gets priority. It's an executive piece of legislation, and also the scrutiny that it deserves within the Infrastructure Committee, and I certainly will welcome it if it passes second stage, coming to that committee, and we will start scrutinising that hopefully in September. But my party will support this bill at second stage. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Call Justin McNulty.
I rise to speak on the Ports Bill as SDLP member of the Committee for Infrastructure. The 4 trust ports in the North play a vital role in freight and cargo handling, commodity imports and passenger and cruise travel. These services are vital for our island economy. Ports ensure consumers have the goods they need, construction materials are available, and we have sufficient import of fuels. They also play an important role in our tourism sector through facilitating visitors coming into this part of our island. Whilst operating in a commercially viable manner, any profit trust ports make are reinvested back into the port for the development of its own business activities and are also used for the benefit of stakeholders. And that model will not change as part of this legislation. The trust port model has stood the test of time and has worked well for the North. We can see the economic and social benefits in the local communities around the ports. In 2025, DFI completed a review of trust ports in the North to explore how the Department's policy in relation to the trust ports could be updated. The consultation recognised that our ports operated in a competitive environment, so it's important that they can compete effectively with ports in the rest of Ireland and in the UK. The consultation exercise showed that there was significant support for modernising policy in relation to our trust ports, and particularly around the Office of National Statistics reclassification. Trust ports are currently classified by the ONS as a public corporation. This is for accounting purposes only. However, this affects their ability to borrow, as any debt taken on essentially would have an impact on the Department for Infrastructure accounting sheet. The ONS classification was actually changed to current status in April 2005 with no consultation or role for the Assembly in scrutinising or challenging that decision. Reclassification of NI Trust ports from private non-financial corporations to public non-financial corporations is a technical fix to this accounting classification, and the Harbours Bill allows for this through removing indicators of control, including the power to compel a sale of the port and the power to direct. The power to direct has never been used. Of course.
Welcoming this bill, it should be noted that greater autonomy could come with greater accountability, and economic development and community well-being should go hand in hand. As an MLA for South Down, I've had significant engagement with the residents of Warren Point, who have been raising ongoing concerns about odours and environmental nuisance associated with activities that are taking place in the harbour near to them. Would the member agree with me that consideration should be given in this bill that there is stronger departmental powers to ensure accountability to ports should their commercial work impact local communities, such as we've seen in Warren Point?
Absolutely. I think that the Minister and the Department can never relinquish the reins of proper scrutiny. ONS reclassification will mean all trust ports can borrow, allowing them commercial flexibility to invest more in their ports. This will result in improved port facilities and the ability to grow trade from each of the ports. A change of accounting status by ONS would also bring us in line with the Scottish trust ports and several trust ports in England and Wales that have already been reclassified. Importantly, the trust port status will not change. This model has worked well for us in the north, and the protection of the model should be welcomed. We do look forward to this legislation coming to committee to allow us to do a deep dive on each of the clauses. We support the bill, second stage.
Sinead Ellis.
So firstly, I want to thank the Minister for her work in progressing this legislation and bringing it to the Chamber today. It is clear from what she has said and what we know about the bill that doing nothing in relation to trust ports would severely impact their future operability. When it comes to looking at what the bill proposes to change, essentially what this narrow bill is doing is ensuring that trust ports can compete with other ports across these islands and better contribute to the regional economy into the future. Also, it cannot be lost that this bill seeks to improve marine safety issues similar to the updates that have been made in other jurisdictions. At present, we know that ports are restricted by the borrowing arrangements that they must abide by. Their reality sees them borrowing from the department, which is already in a very constrained capital budget position, as the Minister has outlined. The provisions within the bill, however, will ensure that the accountability and oversight mechanisms that commissioners provide on the board of a port or harbour will continue. That is an important scrutiny function over the operation and management of ports. To be clear, Las Cancorla, Sinn Féin does not support free ports, but we do support the measures within this bill which will ensure that the legislative and governance frameworks of commercial trust ports across the north are modernised and fit for purpose. The requirement of ports to reinvest their profits into the operation of their port and for the port's benefit has a positive impact on the economy. We only have to look at the Belfast Harbour Master Plan, which sets out the possible significant economic impact that can have. This includes enabling a quarter of all island-wide seaborne trade, which in turn creates $8.8 billion in gross value added, equating to 15.7% of the total annual output of the North. Significant job creation is also evident, with estimates of 155,000 jobs supported across the region and 20,000 people employed within the harbour estate itself. With the plan's prospect of additional housing, renewable energy and a boost to island-wide trade, we must ensure that we are supporting trust ports to be more sustainable into the future.
Lascan Corla, as an MLA whose constituency office is mere metres away from Warrenpoint Port, I do recognise the benefits the ports can have, mainly for imports and exports, and also for the all-island-wide economy, and therefore we must ensure that we support them in becoming able to compete with other ports across these islands. But, Deputy Speaker, I cannot speak about the Harbours Bill without referencing the odour issue affecting my constituents in Warrenpoint. As the Minister will be acutely aware, the community in Warrenpoint have had and continue to be badly impacted by the commercial decisions taken by Warrenpoint Harbour Authority and Regen to store putrid household waste at the port. This issue is entirely unacceptable for those living nearby, and one that I am committed to resolving. The people in Warrenpoint are right to expect that they can live in their homes without being subjected to persistent and unpleasant smells, and their concerns are genuine and they deserve action. If I thought for 1 second that this bill could be used as a vehicle for ending the misery inflicted on my community by Regen and Warrenpoint Harbour Authority, I and the Minister would be the first to ensure that that was acted upon. The people I represent want real solutions, and they want the agencies and departments responsible to do their jobs, and they want an end to the misery. Minister, you and I have been lobbied in recent days on this, so I think we do need to be honest in this chamber about where responsibility and authority actually sits and what this bill can and perhaps more importantly can't do. We have been dealing with this issue for 3 years now, and I know that Warrenpoint Harbour Authority operates as a commercial entity, and the Department for Infrastructure currently does not have the power to direct or control its day-to-day commercial operations. That is a fundamental point that needs to be understood, and one that cannot simply be wished away. You and I, Minister, have been lobbied on the possibility, as I said, of amending the bill, so I think it's fair to ask if you, in your response to the debate today, could address the competency of those suggested amendments. I think we need clarity on the suggestion that the Infrastructure Minister either does have or should now take on powers that do not currently exist. We should be very cautious about creating a misleading narrative, particularly when it risks raising false expectations among residents in Warrenpoint. Instead, the focus must be on the agencies that do have responsibility, including the environmental regulators, enforcement bodies such as the NIEA and the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, and whether they are doing enough and have sufficient powers to tackle issues like this effectively. My hope is that this bill may open up more and greater economic and commercial opportunities for Warrenpoint Port, and it will allow them to attract better tenants that don't cause a nuisance to the communities in which they are situated. So I would ask the Minister to clarify a number of important points. Could the Minister set out clearly for the record what powers the Department actually has in relation to ports such as Warrenpoint? And can she confirm that these do not extend to directing commercial operations? Can the Minister also spell out clearly what, if any, scope this bill would have to stop the storage of waste at Warrenpoint Port? And can she outline which bodies are responsible for regulating issues such as odour and environmental nuisance, and what coordination is taking place to ensure that complaints from residents are acted upon? We need the agencies responsible for protecting communities from odour nuisance to do their jobs. We as MLAs need to hold them to account, and we don't do that by misplacing responsibility. This issue needs to be resolved, and it must be done on the basis of fact and proper accountability. And with that said, Minister, Sinn Féin will be supporting this bill at second stage. Sunday
McMurray. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Minister. I'll be speaking in my role as an infrastructure spokesperson for the Lions Party, and also as my role as MLA for South Down. And I would certainly echo in his comments as chair of the committee what the chairperson of the committee has said about approaching this bill. I suppose from the offset, it should also be said as well that we certainly support ports. We are an island nation, so there's only one way trade is going to come in to us, and that is through the port. So it is an important bill to support. And Alliance is supportive of the principle of the bills and the goals that it's trying to achieve. Some of the points have been mentioned already: maritime orders, financial regulations, but I'll certainly concentrate on the regional economy, as already been noted, and also accountability, which has also been touched upon. This is fundamentally about allowing trust ports to invest in key areas of growth. This will not only drive the Northern Ireland economy, but also the potential to aid and drive the economy in South Down. Belfast Harbour, through its master plan, would like to make large-scale investments in renewable energy infrastructure, but it is currently severely hampered in this regard. We should be in a position to support investment in renewables, and there is no hope of achieving our net zero objectives and obligations, as well as securing our future energy needs, without this kind of investment. So we need to put in place the right regulatory conditions in order to remove these unnecessary barriers. Investing in renewable energy at Belfast Harbour could have a trickle-down effect on ports in my constituency. Kilkeel and Ardglass have great potential for ancillary industries such as maintenance and security of offshore energy production. And I am on the record repeatedly calling for more investment in these areas and championing the great benefits the blue-green economy can bring to the fishing ports in my constituency. The reality is that the current classification of trust ports as a public corporation is dampening economic development, and as a result, Northern Ireland is at further risk of falling further behind in important areas of growth. Reclassification would remove these constraints and open up new opportunities to support the Executive's wider policy objectives in regard to economic growth, tourism and decarbonisation. Reclassification requires limiting some of the Department's powers, in particular the power to issue directions to trust ports. And this is something several constituents of mine, as Ms Ennis has already referenced, has made as a major concern with me. The Minister will be aware of the contentious situation in Warrenpoint Harbour and questions that have been asked about her Department's ability to intervene. I myself have written to the Minister and tabled questions in relation to these powers and their implications for Warrenpoint. My constituents are concerned that the bill removes the Department's power to issue directions to Warrenpoint Harbour Authority while adding no new duties on the port for transparency, community engagement or environmental planning and compliance. I would hope the Minister can respond to some of these concerns directly. As I have said, Alliance supports the reclassification of trust ports in principle, and we understand that this requires the limiting of the Department's powers. But I am convinced that we do need to have stronger safeguards. Other regions do handle this better than we currently do, and we want to see the strengthening of accountability to the local community. Alliance called for this in our response to the Department's review of trust ports last year. This bill is an opportunity to strengthen oversight and accountability. That opportunity mustn't be missed. The Department itself acknowledged in the consultation that there were areas where it may be possible to strengthen the transparency and accountability of the trust ports beyond what is currently in place. This consultation referred to the example of Dover, where 2 members of the board must have special knowledge or experience of the harbour's position within the local community. Dover also has a port users group and a port and community forum who must be consulted on all significant developments within the port and the appointment of 2 community representatives of the board. The consultation also made reference to a draft code of practice, which was developed in 2008 but hasn't yet been implemented. This stated that trust ports are to run for the benefit of their stakeholders, and that explicitly includes secondary stakeholders such as local community and specific interest groups covering environmental or other matters. Additional transparency measures were also included in the draft code of conduct. None of these potential new oversights and accountability mechanisms have been included in the draft bill, and this is something I will be keen to explore with the committee during the committee stage to see what more can be done in this regard. As Alliance spokesperson for infrastructure, I look forward to scrutinise the bill in committee in the coming weeks and months, and in the interest of Warrenpoint will be foremost in my mind. But as has already been stated, the surmised, it's about looking at outdated controls, but not at the removal of completely controls. It's about the Office of National Statistics reclassification, and it's about being commercially supportive to our ports in order to achieve our renewable objectives. And yeah, thank you, Chair, or Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker.
John Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And as Ulster's Party Infrastructure spokesperson today, I'm happy to support the second stage of the Harbours Bill today, and just want to thank the Minister and her departmental colleagues for bringing it forward, and also to all those who took part in the consultation, and to our ports, particularly Belfast Harbour, who have been very helpful and engaging with this so far. And I want to echo as well the comments made by the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee, Member for North Down, and obviously, Mr Deputy Speaker, I agree with everything he said on behalf of the committee, and we look forward as a committee to scrutinising it. Mr Deputy Speaker, while the bill contains only 6 clauses, its potential significance cannot be underestimated. As we've heard, it seeks to modernise the legislative framework governing Northern Ireland's trust ports, remove outdated restrictions and support future investment and growth. And although I do, as others have done today, welcome the bill today, it is disappointing that it has taken so long for it to come forward. And we've talked about this, heard about this being talked about for nearly 20 years now. And for too long, our ports have operated within a framework that everyone accepts requires modernisation. And that has limited opportunities for investment and left our ports competing with unnecessary constraints. But thankfully, we are here today, and we look forward to this progressing with the proper scrutiny as quickly as possible. Mr Deputy Speaker, our ports are among Northern Ireland's most important strategic assets. They facilitate trade, support employment, attract investment, enable tourism and connect our economy to the international markets. The purpose of the bill is clear: to ensure our ports are better placed to contribute to economic growth and to respond to future opportunities. Our trust ports, Belfast Harbour, Foyle Port, Coleraine Harbour and Warren Point, occupy a unique position. They are independent statutory bodies not owned by shareholders and not operated for private profit. Their profits are reinvested into infrastructure, operations and the communities they serve, and that model has served Northern Ireland well and is worth preserving. Although I do take the points that have been already made regarding Warren Point and that need, Mr Deputy Speaker, to see community engagement, community accountability, and would be interested to hear from the Minister where she thinks this bill could go in regards to that, or what other measures could be brought in. The member for South Down made a really important and valid point regarding Dover and the community engagement that takes place there. There may well be models of best practice that exists across these islands that we want to tap into in order to have that freedom to trade, but also to protect the local economies that they purport to serve. Happy to give way.
Well, the point you make is absolutely crucial, but it is about getting that balance right, and how local communities will be concerned whenever they see that Clause 2 is the limitation of power to issue directions to the Harbour Authority, and in the memorandum actually states the amendment therefore prevents the Department for Infrastructure for giving directions to, and amongst other, Warren Point Harbour Authority, that's seen as actually removing any departmental oversight, and that it's critical that we get the balance right, and hopefully the Minister will be able to show how we can get that balance right, that if things go wrong, this place still has the ability to intervene.
I thank the member for his intervention, and the point is well made. This is about balance. It's about removing the shackles that will limit the economic development and growth opportunities that the ports require, but also about protecting the communities, as I say, that they purport to serve. That is a delicate balancing act, but it can be done by looking at how others do it successfully elsewhere. Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to temporarily just acknowledge Larnport in my own constituency. While the legislation does not apply to Larne because of its ownership structure, it remains a vital part of Northern Ireland's transport and trade infrastructure, and I pay tribute to the work that they do and look forward to seeing the exciting opportunities coming forward for economic growth, particularly for East Antrim, but for Northern Ireland PLC as well. Much of the discussion around the bill has focused on the Office of National Statistics classification issue, and understandably so. However, this legislation is about more than accounting classifications. It is about modernisation, flexibility and giving our ports the tools they need to compete in a rapidly changing global economy. Just to go through the clauses temporarily, if I will, Mr Deputy Speaker, clauses 1 and 2 are particularly important. They remove the Department's powers to initiate privatisation schemes and direct the activities of trust ports. Some may question the significance of removing powers that are rarely exercised, but the answer is simple. If we regard these organisations as independent bodies, they should be treated as such. The existence of these powers creates a perception of government control that sits uneasily along their independent status. The bill sends an important message. It demonstrates confidence in the governance arrangements already in place and in the boards and management teams that have successfully led these organisations for many years. Clause 3 provides greater commercial flexibility by removing the requirement for ministerial consent before harbour authorities acquire harbour businesses or shares in such businesses. In a modern commercial environment, organisations need the ability to make timely decisions. This provision supports that objective while remaining consistent with the Trust Ports model. Clause 4 introduces power for harbour authorities to issue harbour directions. While technical in nature, that is a practical reform that will improve the management, safety and efficiency of our port operations. The bill allows harbour authorities, once authorised, to issue directions relating to vessel movements, mooring arrangements, equipment and crane matters. Importantly, these powers are accompanied by safeguards, including the consultation requirements and transparency measures, which I think are incredibly important. This strikes an appropriate balance between operational effectiveness and accountability, and it's back to the point that we discussed previously, Mr Deputy Speaker. Clauses 5 and 6 further support the overall objective of modernisation by expanding the powers for which harbour orders may be made and providing greater flexibility for future operational arrangements. Mr Deputy Speaker, we must also recognise the wider economic significance of this legislation. At present, Northern Ireland's trust ports are classified by the Office of National Statistics as public non-financial corporations because the government is deemed to exercise a degree of control over them, and we've heard about this already. And as a result, borrowing by trust ports counts against the Department for Infrastructure's capital budget, which, as we know, in the current financial situation, but at any time is not an ideal arrangement. The purpose of this bill is to remove those remaining levers of control and facilitate a review of that classification. It is important to be clear that this is not privatisation, and I just want to get that on the record from our point of view, and I know that others have speculated, not necessarily in this chamber today, but others in this House have speculated that this is a backdoor to privatisation. I know that none of the ports want to see that, I know the Department doesn't want to see that, and I know the Minister doesn't want to see that, but I think it is important, Mr Deputy Speaker, to get that on the record, that ownership does not change, assets do not change hands, and trust ports remain trust ports. I think that is an important clarifying point. What may change is their accounting classification, and with it their ability to access finance and invest in the future. Perhaps the clearest example of the opportunity before us is at Belfast City Harbour. Under the leadership of the Chief Executive, the excellent board and management team, Belfast Harbour has become one of the most successful trust ports across these islands, and the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee referred to this. I think it is incredible to see just the expanse that is there and the intent going forward. Its impact extends far beyond the docks themselves, supporting regeneration, infrastructure and economic development across Northern Ireland. The recently published 2025 to 2050 Master Plan outlines around £1.3 billion of potential investment over the coming decades. That is a staggering amount and must be praised. That investment will strengthen port infrastructure, support economic growth, improve connectivity, enhance tourism and help Northern Ireland for future prosperity, all to be welcomed. After all, Belfast Harbour, Mr Deputy Speaker, handles around 70% of Northern Ireland's seaborne trade. Its success benefits the entire of Northern Ireland. But opportunities do extend beyond Belfast. Foyleport plays a critical role in the North West economy. Warren Point is a key economic asset for the South East, and Coleraine Harbour continues to support important commercial and fishing interests. And collectively, our ports support thousands of jobs, facilitating billions of pounds of economic activity. The success of our ports is not simply a transport issue, it is an economic issue and a prosperity one for Northern Ireland as a whole. And with this, I hope to see and do believe that they will see significant growth going forward. Looking ahead, the importance of ports is only likely to increase. Offshore renewable energy, as we've heard from the member from South Down, green technologies, cruise tourism, resilient supply chains and modern logistic infrastructure will all place ports here in Northern Ireland at the centre of economic development opportunity. The regions that invest and modernise now, Mr Deputy Speaker, will be best placed to benefit from these opportunities, and I believe this bill will give that opportunity. Happy to give an intervention to the Chair.
I want to thank the member for taking an intervention. Would he agree with me that when we look at how we bring in FDI or investment into Northern Ireland, infrastructure is critical? And part of that infrastructure that delivers both jobs and investment is actually our ports. That's what we're talking about today. So would he agree with me that actually getting this right and getting this bill right and getting it through is actually a key enabler and driver to more jobs and more investment in Northern Ireland?
I thank the member for his intervention, and yes, I absolutely do. I think our ports and our airports have recognised that for a long time, and they're playing their role to do it. And I believe through this bill that it will give them, as I say earlier on, remove the shackles that have limited the growth that they wanted to achieve and open that up. And I do recognise that businesses across the world want to have key economic assets in places like Northern Ireland where they can trade into easily and make bases out of, and I believe our ports are willing and waiting to do that, and with this legislation it will come forward. Just to finish off, Mr Deputy Speaker, ultimately this bill, whether we are prepared to modernise outdated legislation, trust our ports and create the conditions for future investment and growth. It asks that question, and I believe the answer should be yes. The bill modernises governance, removes unnecessary controls, increases operational flexibility, supports future investment, and helps position Northern Ireland ports for the opportunities ahead. For those reasons, Mr Deputy Speaker, I and my party are happy to support it at the second stage, and I look forward to the Minister's response and working with the Minister and our departmental colleagues as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, the Business Committee has arranged to meet at 1 p.m. today. I propose, therefore, by leave of the Assembly, to suspend. Point of order, Mr McGrath.
Just while there is it's actually, I hope, a point of good order. It's just I have a genuine appointment that I need to leave at 3:15, and I won't be in my place for the Minister's response. I just wanted to be, that it's not a slight on the response, it's just I have to leave and I won't be here, so it's just maybe to put that on the record.
Mr McGrath, thank you. That courtesy has been noted. Business Committee has agreed to meet at 1 p.m. I propose, therefore, by leave of the Assembly, to suspend the sitting until 2 p.m. The debate will continue following question time today, when the next member to be called will be Melissa McHugh. The sitting is, by leave, suspended.